So what does marketing fulfillment look like today? Well, we undertook a pretty robust research study, and we did an online survey late last year speaking to about almost 250 organizations across 8 different verticals in North America. We asked for the participants to be those decision makers responsible for management and marketing fulfillment within their firms, and we got a pretty broad range of folks in terms of titles and so on, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. We asked them to talk to us a little bit about their funding, how they fund their marketing fulfillment programs, how they measure their marketing fulfillment programs, the technology that they use, the vendors that they use, and then what their perceived maturity is against their peers. The industries that we spoke to are pretty evenly distributed by design, of course. So we spoke to folks in business services, CPG, consumer packaged goods, consumer technology, financial services, food and beverage, healthcare, medical, pharmaceutical, and of course, retail. And with these clients, we sort of asked them, tell us who's in the driver's seat. Tell us who is responsible for making marketing fulfillment decisions in your organization. And we did find that the majority of clients said marketing leads in this area. We do have a procurement department. About 40% told us that procurement participates in the marketing fulfillment buying decisions, but they're not actually driving them. In about a quarter of the firms we spoke to, procurement is actually leading marketing fulfillment, which generally speaking we think is a challenge because frankly, it's not a strategic, it doesn't allow marketing fulfillment to become a strategic purchasing decision. About 20% of firms told us they run on their own, the marketers run on their own. About 15% equal participation for marketing procurement. And fortunately, only 2% of the firms that we spoke with let procurement make the decisions across the board. Now, companies are using are disseminating a wide array of materials, and they're delivering that material concurrently. So in general, when we asked all of the 250 participants what kinds of marketing consumables they're distributing, you see that fully 80% of them are using documentation, things like literature and collateral and so on. But, they're also using a lot of other stuff. Sampling programs are a big part of this, exhibit booths, giveaways and point-of-sale signage, digital sales materials, and then it sort of falls off a little bit. But when we looked at how retailers are actually using marketing fulfillment, we saw very, very different scales. Here we see that roughly between 63 and 70% of the retailers we spoke with are using all 3 of these different kinds of materials. That's POS signage, gift cards, and packaging. So while they may not be using as many different types of materials broadly, they're certainly using them more consistently. And of the ones that they are using, there's much deeper penetration against those 3 types of materials. And when you think about it, those 3 types of materials are absolutely that final mile of customer relationship and customer engagement. I mean, that POS signage is so critical to how your customer perceives your brand and your business. So then we sort of asked, all right, well, of all of that stuff that you're using, tell us the range of outlets that you're using them within. So of course, no surprise there that 60% of retailers are using their marketing fulfillment materials at their retail stores. But it was really interesting for us to see that some 30% of them, fully a third, are using field and internal sales as well. Another nearly quarter are using those materials in their branches. And again, a little bit more of a fall off, but you'll see that it's really critical for retailers to have a consistency of messaging for their retail stores and their branches and field sales. Excuse me. So the other thing is that companies are actually really valuing marketing fulfillment differently as a function within their organization. So we think about, how they consider marketing fulfillment, how they make decisions about purchasing, and it's not a surprise to find that cost is the most important thing. I mean, certainly with the economy being where it is and marketing costs being where they are, cost is always going to be a key consideration. But we were pleased to find that the quality of materials and the timeliness of materials are nearly 2/3 of the considerations, of the most important considerations that that companies look at when they're making their marketing fulfillment decisions. Now, in this slide, this question of optimal customer experience, we're going to touch on this again a little bit later, but you'll see that a third of the folks that we spoke to said, yeah, making sure that my customer has a great experience is really important. Well, then we said, okay, what does that mean to you? So ensuring that both our close customer, the retailer, and our end customer get a positive impression of our brand and our product, great. Ease, reliability, and accuracy, okay. The material needs to effectively communicate our ideas in a way that strikes the customer's needs. That's a great one, right? I mean, that really speaks to how important marketing fulfillment is. That our customers are impressed with our materials. We want our clients to think we're marketing geniuses. I loved this one. An experience that's engaging, interactive, and offers the customer flexible and complete solutions. Delivering the best customer experience through an informed and well-armed sales force, great. The alignment of an entire organization around a shared vision of service philosophy and customer experience. We think of this as the very definition of customer centricity, and it's really impressive to hear that companies are thinking about marketing fulfillment in that perspective. And the most important one is 100% customer satisfaction. Great, right? These are really, really key quotes that we got from the stakeholders that we spoke with, and it's really great to hear this. Now, certainly there are challenges with executing marketing fulfillment, and we really wanted to dig into what some of those challenges are. Vendors are really high on the challenge list here. So 30% of clients are saying the vendor compliance is an issue, and another 26% are saying that a vendor's ability to react to those last-minute changes is a challenge for them. The majority, however, are still working with a number of vendors. And we have a quick poll for you here, and we'd love to understand what kinds of companies you work with to support your marketing fulfillment activities. Now, bear in mind that most of the companies we spoke to certainly use between 1 and 15, a full 75% of them. So we'd love to understand what types of external vendors are you working with? Your printers, your shippers, agencies, fulfillment companies? Let us know, and we'll report back on that for you in just a few minutes. We found that nearly 70% of companies are using their printer, which is not a big surprise, especially in the retail space, given the kinds of material that is being printed. But shippers, ad agencies, fulfillment specialists, these are all key players in the vendor landscape. Now, budget is also an issue, of course. A lack of budget to support the quality of marketing consumables and a lack of budget to support the accurate and timely delivery of those consumables are both pointed to as key challenges within the companies that we spoke with. And then culturally, marketing just isn't a priority. So we think about this in terms of the delays that internal stakeholders the delays of internal stakeholders to provide approvals. Slow approval rates for internal stakeholders so vendors can meet deadlines. You see this is definitely a cycle that sort of perpetuates itself. If the culture isn't important, if culturally it's not important, there's not going to be a budget for it, and executing isn't going to be a priority. Now, all of that culture, of course, comes from the top down. So what are some of the executive level challenges? Lack of executive support for building a best-in-class marketing fulfillment foundation, and lack of executive visibility into the business impact. Now, again, not a huge surprise here, given that marketing fulfillment, especially in retail, has typically been sort of seen as a back-burnered piece of marketing. But we'd like to see that change, and we think that the importance of marketing fulfillment is being well undermeasured and undervalued by the executives. So then we went into sort of how companies measure and assess their marketing fulfillment programs. Kind of a lot of challenges here. Measuring timeliness is largely achievable, but measuring accuracy and quality are a much more difficult challenge. So fine, 60% of companies tell us that they can identify when orders are fulfilled within a given time frame. That's great. But less than half can actually measure accuracy, they can, or perform quality audits of their marketing fulfillment programs. Now, audit frequency also depends on the metric that's being measured. So 44% of companies are evaluating them against the quality of material, or of timeliness. 47% are benchmarking against the quality of materials 4 or more times per year. That's really, really important. But you'll see, too, that this falls off pretty dramatically after we hit that 47 and 44% who are doing it quarterly or more. Largely 10+% are saying that they don't audit at all. So the other challenge here is that a lot of firms rely on their vendors to measure their marketing fulfillment programs. That's really a challenge because vendors' SLAs are not a substitute for analytics. So 41% are saying, yep, we use SLAs to measure timeliness, 29% for quality, and 26% for accuracy. But analytics, it's not a replacement, right? We still need to use internal analytics and internal metrics to benchmark these things. So what does that tell us? How did we come to this marketing fulfillment sophistication model? Well, first we asked firms to self-report their level of sophistication, and we're going to be hitting you with another slide or another poll in just a couple of minutes. So be thinking about that as we start to go into some of the definitions of our sophistication model. So the self-reported impression of effectiveness, we found that about 50% of the folks that we spoke with said, yeah, we're about equal to our peers. We typically, we feel like we're not doing any better, we're not doing any worse, we're about equal. That's a typical Arch, I think. But 31% felt that they were actually more effective than their peers in terms of their approach to marketing fulfillment. Then we sort of said, all right, we know what you guys think about yourselves, but let's analyze the survey responses and build out a sort of a maturity model. First, we defined those maturity segments. The leaders in the group treat marketing fulfillment as a strategic function. They support it with investment. They have executive sponsorship. Marketing fulfillment has a place at the table when marketing programs are being planned. The latents, who are sort of that middle group, are the folks who are saying, look, we know we need to improve. We're making strides. We are starting to think about marketing fulfillment a little bit differently, but we still sit squarely between the laggards and the leaders. And then the laggards are those who say, fulfillment just isn't a key issue for our company. It's not part of customer centricity. It's not part of our strategic marketing planning. And frankly, we don't really see it as a major effort within our organization to make sure that we're front and center with our clients and our customers. So let us ask you this. In that poll, we would love to hear from you what you consider yourself. And we'll give you about 15 seconds to do this now. Do you consider yourself a leader, a laggard, or a latent? All right. So bear in mind how you answered that question. And let's show you this. When we evaluated and considered what the maturity model really looked like, we found that over half of the clients that we spoke with were actually laggards. 35% were latents, and a mere 14% of the companies that we spoke with were those that we considered leaders in their approach to marketing fulfillment. That's the reality. Now, impressively, retailers lead the pack here. 23% of retailers are those that we considered leaders in marketing fulfillment, 43% latents, and 33% laggards. Now, this is attributable to a number of things, but largely we think it has to do with how much end consumer touch retailers have. Retailers are used to thinking about the customer experience, the consumer experience to the last touch point, largely as a product and a function of how they run their businesses. So that was really heartening to see. Now, what sets leaders and laggards apart? Well, leaders know the importance of marketing fulfillment as a practice. Fully 47% strongly agree, and 40% agree that marketing fulfillment is an increasingly important function to their marketing organizations. In contrast, fewer than 10% of laggards agree, and only 20% of latents do. Now, marketing fulfillment, does it need an overhaul? Well, even the leaders that we spoke to absolutely understand that marketing fulfillment is never a done deal. You're never done improving it. The laggards, generally speaking, don't see that. These are the folks that we would sort of say, hey, we'd like to see you improve your marketing fulfillment function. They just don't really think that it needs to be. There are also some key differentiators between tiers, and we sort of broke these up into three different areas. The first is cultural support. So we thought about whether or not companies are thinking about fulfillment when they're planning their marketing programs and planning their marketing strategy. Leaders across the board said yes. Fully 90% told us that yeah, it's an important consideration when we're thinking about our marketing strategy and marketing planning. Laggards, just over a third, really feel that this is an important part of the marketing strategy process. Are they organized to optimize their marketing fulfillment processes? Leaders, again, fully 90%. The laggards, fewer than 1%, strongly agree that they're organized to optimize marketing fulfillment. This is clearly an area for improvement. Lines of business and channels, this is an important one because, again, we'd like to believe that retailers especially are thinking about lines of businesses and channels more holistically, but that's not always the case. Instead, what we found was that the leaders were thinking about lines of business consistently, whereas laggards are, again, barely 30%, not even a third are thinking about this across lines of business. And we consider this idea to be largely one of efficiency and economy, right? So when you are consistent across your lines of business, if you understand how to manage marketing programs and processes across lines of business, not only are you delivering a more holistic experience to your customer, but you actually have financial gains for doing so. Now, senior leaders in the leader organizations are a key differentiator. In one of the big differences here between some of the other slides that you've seen is that latents also have a pretty high degree of senior leadership and senior support of marketing fulfillment. That's a really great thing to see because it means that those latents actually have an opportunity to kind of work up the rung in terms of the maturity scale. And then, do you have the right people in place? Well, the leaders, by and large, 94% said, yep, we absolutely do. We've hired for this. We have a team of people who manage our marketing fulfillment investments. They manage the data, they manage the processing, and they manage the vendors, right? This is really, really important. Now, the latents also seem to have a benefit here and a bit of an opportunity. Laggards, not so much. I mean, 50% of them say, yeah, we have people who manage this stuff, but the truth is when we think about their place on the maturity model and the maturity scale, what does that really mean? If they're actually not mature, are they really managing? Do they really have a team that manages marketing fulfillment, or do they have a team that manages marketing stuff and fulfillment happens to be part of it? So the next set of differentiators between tiers come in the place of measurement and analytics. So how do people actually measure and how frequently? Well, the leaders, by and large, nearly 100% of them actually measure regularly and consistently. And they're measuring not just things like timeliness and quality, but they're actually measuring the impact of fulfillment on their marketing programs and their marketing organization. The latents are doing a good job. Laggards, not so much, right? Again, 2% strongly agree that they're measuring consistently. We also asked them about dedicated resources for analytics. And again, I'll harken back to the conversation around using vendor SLAs versus internal analytics. And this is a really key differentiator. Now, again, leaders and latents are kind of almost neck and neck on this one, which is great to see. But this is an area where the laggards really need to grow. Having an internal analytics team is great, but making sure that that analytics team really understands the marketing fulfillment process, understands how to optimize that marketing fulfillment process. These are some key areas that we'd like to see developed. And then back to the issue of centralization. So if you have a holistic view and a consistent approach to marketing fulfillment, then you very likely have a centralized analytics function as well. So we see this reflected fairly equally to the other slide. Leaders, over 90%, have a centralized analytics function to predict optimal usage, to ensure that, to predict the impact, future impact, and to actually make decisions based on analytics of marketing fulfillment. Now, here's another really interesting one, and we'll ask you here as well. To what extent do you agree or disagree that you have visibility and can monitor and assess the last mile relative to your company's culture today? Now, we think of last mile as, again, that end point, that final touch point with the customer. Ensuring that for example, that your clients are seeing the materials that you're putting into the field. That the right materials are making it into the store. To make sure that customers are getting that material once it's in the store. Now, are you able to do that today? Hopefully we'll get some poll respondents there as well. So, even our leaders here have more of a challenge than they do with some of the other areas. And frankly, that's largely just a function of what that last mile means, right? It's very difficult to see and to understand exactly what's happening in the store when POS materials are making it there, when signage and rounder signs are making it into the store. How quickly are they making it to the floor and that sort of thing. It's a difficult thing to measure, but it's one of those things that we find the right vendor can actually be a huge support for. So the other thing is this idea of visibility into how they're used in the field. And this is less critical for retailers, of course, but still pretty important. When you think about how your sales leaders and your inside sales folks are using marketing consumables, we'd like to understand, it's important to understand whether those things are actually making it into the customer's hands or if they're making it into a dumpster. And that's a pretty important thing to understand given the cost of producing marketing consumables, right? We don't want to see these end up in a dumpster somewhere. We'd like to see them end up in a consumer's hands. So the third tier of key differentiators is technology. So do companies have the right technology? Leaders, by and large, some 83% of them, agree that they have, whether internally or outsourced, the right technology to optimize their marketing fulfillment programs. Latents, they're doing okay. About 60% of them are there. Laggards are not investing. It's just not. Again, it speaks to not having that executive level support. The laggards simply just don't have the investment for technology. From a sort of technology strategy too, laggards, it's amazing to us, but there were no laggards who said that they had a defined marketing fulfillment technology strategy. That's kind of a shock, right? We think of things like strategy as pretty critical to being able to grow an area of business, to being able to prove the business value of a process. When you're not defining a strategy, it's impossible to do that. It's impossible to get a business case in place, right? You see this in our leaders. Again, over 90% of them have defined a marketing fulfillment strategy. So optimizing processes also. How many of our leaders are using, technology to optimize their marketing fulfillment? 95%. Great to see that, right? Because again, optimization is such an important part of strategy, of marketing strategy generally. Latents are doing well here. Now, 72%, actually nearly 75%, are using technology and are thinking about optimization. That's really important, and again, speaks to their ability to develop their marketing fulfillment as well. Marketing fulfillment partners. This is one of the really interesting things that we looked at, largely because, frankly, the number of vendors that most clients that we spoke to used. So when you think about that pie chart that we showed earlier, where companies are using between 1 and 15 marketing fulfillment partners, when you're talking to 5, 10, 12, 15 vendors, you can't be that strategic, right? It's very, very difficult to be totally strategic if you don't have accountability across those vendors. So it's not a surprise to us here that even within the laggards, we're only seeing about 80% of them who have chosen their marketing fulfillment partner strategically. That's a key area that we'd like to see develop. So I want to give you some feedback on the polls that we've done. So when we asked you guys how many of you are using different types of printers or different types of vendors, some 8% of you responded that you're using your printers. About 15% are using an agency, and another 15 of you are using your fulfillment partner. So that was great to see. Let's see here. Okay. So what are some of the key findings that we have for the research that we did? Well, obviously most firms are rating themselves much higher on the maturity scale than they really are. That does tend to be the case when we do research surveys like this, but it was pretty disparate in the pretty broad disparity between what we found here and what we actually found in terms of the maturity scale. And actually creating that maturity model was a bit of a challenge, largely because of how firms were rating themselves. Marketing fulfillment also is a key part of the overall marketing program, and it does really need to be part of the strategic plan. It's one of the things that we'd really like to see more firms embrace in terms of how they're approaching marketing fulfillment. Measurement. It's a key factor in developing maturity. This is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, right? You need to find the investment in order to, within your organization, in order to measure marketing fulfillment processes. But you can't really become mature if you don't have the investment, right? So how do you, and if you're not doing the measurement. So how do you build a process for this? Well, the right combination of service providers and technology. This really comes down to leveraging the resources that you have both internally and externally, and making sure that you have the right partners on board who have deep industry experience, deep experience within your vertical to help you understand what best practices are for marketing fulfillment strategy, and so on. So what do we recommend here? Well, the first thing is to evaluate your current marketing fulfillment maturity using the self-assessment. And you'll actually receive, after this webinar is complete, you'll actually receive an email with a link to the self-test that we produced for Archway. It's a really great diagnostic tool, and it'll give you the opportunity to sort of understand where you are on the spectrum, and how you can actually start to take steps to improve your maturity. The other thing is to determine organizational readiness to evolve. Now, this is centralization is a really key opportunity for retailers, and here's why. Across the board, we sort of asked, as you saw earlier, how centralized their marketing fulfillment processes were, and we found that generally speaking in the retail group, that was a pretty low number. Only 30% of the retail firms that we spoke to are centralized across lines of business and geography, another 17% by function. This is by and large a much smaller number than the rest of the verticals and the rest of the industries that we spoke with. So the other thing is to shift the cultural impressions of marketing fulfillment. Really a key one here because, again, understanding and making sure the executives understand the importance of marketing fulfillment, its impact to the overall marketing program, its impact to the overall marketing organization is really key. So that means gaining visibility, right? And again, this is an area that we saw retailers just really don't have the same level of visibility from an executive from the executive suite. Fewer than 3% of the folks that responded to our survey in the retail category were at the C-level or above, or those people being those responsible for marketing fulfillment purchasing decisions. Nearly a third were VP level and above, which is good, it's healthy, but 37% and 30% respectively were directors and managers. And really, if that's where the full sort of accountability lies for making purchasing decisions, that's not high enough. That generally means that marketing fulfillment is not making it to the planning table early enough. So when you think about how advanced retailers actually are in the entire spectrum of marketing fulfillment maturity, those are the two areas that we find are absolutely low-hanging fruit for those latents to actually become leaders. The other thing is to set a roadmap. You need a roadmap, you need a timeline to achieve maturity, and it has to be reasonable. Start small, build on progress. These are all really great things, but we also recommend piloting programs in one channel. So a lot of organizations don't actually have the ability to say, well, we're going to implement a whole hog marketing fulfillment strategy across all of our channels, across all of our brands and lines of business, across all of our geographies. That's okay. But pilot a program. Find one geography, find one retail channel, identify which one it is, and start small. Once you've proven the value and the worth of the marketing fulfillment program and how a strategic marketing fulfillment program really does impact the entire marketing cycle and marketing budget optimization, you'll gain buy-in, you'll gain leverage. And then finally, identify the right partners for the three key areas that will help you grow in terms of your maturity: measurability, metrics, analytics. The right partners to deliver insights. Right? These are the right people to help you understand what your industry is doing from a best practice perspective. These are people who can help you understand from an ongoing perspective how your program should change, how your program can change, what other people are doing within both your vertical and outside of it. These partners will absolutely help you drive your marketing maturity. So I'm going to hand it over to Megan now to talk a little bit about one of the case studies that they've worked with, a retail case study that they've worked with, which is really quite impressive.
Great, thanks,
Megan?
Fatima. So Fatima's talked a lot about how to improve the marketing fulfillment process and really evolve on the maturity scale. And we know that's not something that's an easy thing to do. So beyond Forrester's recommendation, what we really want you to know is that we also offer an in-depth assessment process that maps out what you're doing today and helps pinpoint areas for improvement. And we've actually done this for many of our clients, and we've helped them take millions of dollars of unnecessary costs out of their process. So one example I can share is about American Eagle. American Eagle had been managing their marketing supply chain alongside with their product in their DCs. And they knew that there was an opportunity really to enhance their existing process and really make it easier for the stores. Stores were getting signage at the same time as product. They didn't have enough room in the back storage area when it was coming in, and there's just a lot of confusion there. So they contacted Archway to assess their current state, and we really spent about a day meeting with various stakeholders on site with them, learning about their goals, their wishes, processes, and of course their pain. After we documented everything for American Eagle, we brought it back to our solutions team, who then really crafted a custom solution for them. And the solution really ended up saying, you're really good at distributing your product to your stores, but you need to be outsourcing your point of sale material and your props to make sure that they're getting just as much attention as your product is. So we designed an outsource model for them that really focused on managing their inbound freight for their print and their props, and then really kitting up all that material to make sure that that's based on store profile so that each of those stores were only getting exactly what they need at the exact time that they needed it. We also provide American Eagle a white glove delivery method to make sure that the stores situated within malls are getting all their materials at the right time and it's not getting lost in the mall packaging traffic. And what this has really resulted in then for them is a reduced in-store labor. This is probably one of American Eagle's biggest wins here, is that they've really made it easier for the retail stores to manage the campaigns when they come in, because it's a planned package that's coming. They're able to staff for those materials showing up at that time instead of dealing with all the product and the signs coming in at once. So they've cut their labor. And then additionally, they've really created an improved brand experience at every store, because all of those stores now are getting their materials at the exact same time on the exact same day so that they can switch over their in-store campaigns at the same time across the nation. And really importantly, we are able to give them visibility into their supply chain so that they could see where all of their signs are, where all of their props are, how much they have on hand, what's been received at the stores, what they're getting more requests for, to help them be able to perform those analytics to make smarter decisions for future campaigns. And additionally, being able to house their store profiles to help them understand what kind of demand do they need for future campaigns. And the best part for American Eagle is that we were able to implement this updated solution for them within 21 days so that they were able to hit their back-to-store needs. And we've been doing this now for American Eagle for about 3 years, and we continue to improve their process, bring them different solutions, and take cost out of that process. So I know we covered a lot today between Fatima and some of the things that we've shared. After this webinar is over, if you've got questions, I encourage you to reach out to your Archway contact or to contact myself. Otherwise, at this time, Fatima, I think it would be great to turn it over to questions. We have a few questions that have come in from participants, and for those of you that haven't had questions, if you've got some, please feel free to use the chat function to share additional questions. But Fatima, this first question is really for you. What should companies be measuring when analyzing the effectiveness of their marketing fulfillment programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's really 5 key things. The first is timeliness. The importance of the material actually getting into the retailer's hands. I mean, to your American Eagle example, Megan, it is so important. The fact that everything is arriving on time before the merchandise, that people have an opportunity to actually, get the signage organized and sorted. I mean, we all know how harried and frenzied retail operations are. So ensuring that the materials are arriving in a timely fashion is absolutely critical. Also to that point is the accuracy of the delivery. So, you're spending a lot of money on producing these materials. If they don't show up the way that they're supposed to, with the right number of pieces per store, the right number of units, the right mix of materials per store, that's a real problem. So measuring accuracy is important. The quality of materials also, I think, is another key one. This idea that it is the final touch point, it is the last mile to the customer's eyes. The materials have to be delivered at a high quality, right? I want to be polite in saying that. I think it's really important to know that, if you've got pieces that are going to go in a bag or, again, point of sale signage, it has to be delivered, it has to make it to the store at quality. The use of the display, the use of actual materials themselves, absolutely critical, right? So this is one of the areas that we found pretty big disparity on, and I think it's largely because people aren't auditing. There's a real need to audit the actual use of materials once they're in store, to make sure that, again, that's not being wasted, the cost of producing those and delivering them to stores isn't being wasted. And then sort of finally, I would say the efficiency of how the process runs. There is a lot of waste in terms of time, in terms of manpower and hours. I imagine that being able to measure the efficiency of your marketing fulfillment processes from production to, actually to return back to the warehouse or to return for being destroyed, understanding every step of that path and understanding how you can streamline that process will save money, will save time, will save effort. I would say it's those 5 key areas.
Great. So we've got another question that just came in. What type of technology are retail companies using? Most custom solutions, print on demand, agency, or third-party packages? So I'll take that one. There are a number of different technologies that we're seeing people are using, but mostly they're really looking at having a portal that marketing and stores can both use to order materials, to develop campaigns, to be able to push those campaigns out to the marketplace and have the visibility. Other types of technologies that we're seeing people use are really good analytics packages so that they are able to understand what's happening and being able to drill down to certain regions or different types of stores and see why is a store ordering this material over and over and be able to get to the root cause of something. For example, there might be a store that keeps ordering the same poster over and over, and it could be that at that store location where it's placed, it's high traffic, it keeps getting damaged, they have to replace it. That's a great way that they can go back to the store, fix that, change it for the future profiles so that we're not putting the same type of material in that area. A lot of stores are using a combination, too, of offset printing with print on demand. So making sure that you've got, again, a tool that's really centralized with all of your ordering to create print on demand pieces for the stores for your local store marketing. Fatima, any other technologies that you can think of that people are using right now?
I think to your point about reporting and analytics, that's a great one. I think that what we find typically is that an analytics package has to be really easy to use, right? It has to be fairly visual. It has to be fairly intuitive because you don't want to be in a situation where an analyst has to run those reports. And you want to be in a situation where you can sort of be leveraging the data that you have and the insights that you have across the organization. So I think that's a really great one. And using the right analytics packages is pretty critical, I think, to maturing your marketing fulfillment program.
Then I think part of what this question is asking too is, are people looking at agencies to do this? Are they looking at off-the-box technology or really custom solutions? And what I can say is there's a little bit of combination of both because it depends on your business and your specific needs. But for the most part, finding partners that have a good base of a solution that employs those best practices but are able to customize that technology to fit your specific business needs is a key piece. All right, Fatima, another question that we have is, if my company is a latent, does it matter if we ever get to that leadership position, or is this good enough?
Yeah, yes, it is absolutely critical. I think especially with the state of retail today, I mean, we talk a lot about marketing fragmentation, we talk about device fragmentation, we talk about the fact that consumers are driving relationship with brands as opposed to the other way around, which is what we're used to. That being the case, it's really, really important that brands and retailers maintain and leverage every aspect of the customer relationship that they can. And if you're latent, you're not doing that. It's a lost opportunity. And just to kind of level set this real quickly, in that last question that we asked you guys about whether you're able to manage the impact to the last mile, only 8% of you said yes, and 15% of you said sometimes. So when you think about that, that's a pretty big opportunity. The idea that you can, as a leader in marketing fulfillment strategies, you have a very, very different opportunity to speak to your client and to your customer and make sure that that customer is having the best final experience that she can have. The latents can't do that. I mean, certainly not nearly as well, and they certainly can't prove it. So I would say absolutely, and probably more important for retailers than almost anyone else.
Great, thanks, Fatima. So at this time, I'm not seeing any other questions coming across on our chat function. So I think thank you for everybody's, oops, actually we just got one more. Is this report available from Forrester? Yes, this report is available, and actually after this call, we will be sending out a copy of the recording as well as the paper and the self-assessment tool for those that want it. So we will be doing that. But great question. So we encourage you to actually click on the link that we send for the self-assessment and really see where you are, because what we've found in this report with Forrester is that people have a perception of that they might be in that leadership position, but when they actually go through and do the analysis by taking that quiz, it's sometimes surprising where they fall out. So we'll send that to everybody. Fatima, thank you very much for your time and your insights. It's been very helpful for us, and our clients have really been enjoying looking at this data as well.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for joining.